Have you ever wondered what daily life is really like in one of the world's most heavily militarized zones? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into a source that takes a deep look at the reality of military presence in Kashmir. We're going to cover everything from the physical landscape to the profound human cost. Right off the bat, the source hits you with this incredibly striking image. Just think about that for a second. It's saying that for a child in Kashmir, the presence of a soldier is more constant, more immediate than even the sun rising. It's a really powerful way to frame this whole issue, not as some distant political problem, but as a lived daily reality. Okay, so the source talks about a state of siege. But what does that actually look like on the ground? Let's start with the physical reality, the visible military stuff that the source says is just woven into the very fabric of society. So the source paints this picture of Jammu and Kashmir as one of the most militarized places on the entire planet. And we're not talking about something abstract here. This translates to army camps, bunkers, and checkpoints right near schools and hospitals. Daily life, according to the source, is just filled with things like routine frisking, interrogations, surveillance, and even raids on homes, especially in southern districts like Anantnag and Pulwama. So you might be asking yourself, how is such a heavy military presence legally possible? How is it sustained? Well, that brings us to the legal side of things. We're going to look at the laws that the source argues provide a kind of shield of immunity for the military's actions. And right at the heart of this legal framework is a law called the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. You'll see it called AFSPA. Now, it's often justified by the state on national security grounds, but the source we're looking at describes it as a law that gives the military these incredible, sweeping powers. And this is the really key part: immunity from being prosecuted for their actions. So, what kind of powers are we talking about? Well, the source points to things like being able to arrest someone without a warrant, and even to shoot to kill just based on suspicion. But maybe the biggest deal, as the source points out, is how it creates this whole other system of justice. It pretty much gives immunity from civilian courts. You see, to even prosecute a soldier, the central government has to give special permission, and the source claims that almost never happens. Okay, so we've got the physical presence, we've got the legal framework, but what does all of this feel like for the people living there? What's the human cost? Let's shift our focus now to the direct consequences for people, especially the youth, and how, according to the source, information itself gets controlled. And this is where the source points to a really stark contrast. It's all about how young people are perceived and then labeled. The argument is that an act of protest, like teenagers pelting stones, can get them officially labeled as terrorists. And that's a label that, you can imagine, has some incredibly serious consequences. And it's not just FSPA. The source also points to another legal tool, the Public Safety Act, or PSA. Basically, this law allows for something called administrative detention, which is a fancy way of saying imprisonment without a trial for up to 2 years. The document notes this gets used against young people quite a bit. Now, this idea of a siege isn't just physical, it's also digital. The source puts it really bluntly, saying that a digital siege was built to hide the physical siege. The argument is pretty simple. You shut down communication to hide what's really going on the ground. And the source gives a huge example of this: the communication blackout back in 2019. Right after Article 370 was revoked, pretty much all internet and phone services were shut down completely. For months, the region was in a near-total information vacuum. And even after things were slowly turned back on, the source alleges there's still this ongoing climate of censorship and harassment for journalists. This next part gets pretty heavy. We're going to look at some specific cases of alleged human rights abuses that are documented in the source. The text presents these as part of a long, painful history of events where, it claims, justice has been hard to come by, which is why it's titled Unanswered Prayers. The source brings up several really grave allegations, things that it says have left a deep mark on the region's collective memory. It talks about the Kunan Poshpora mass rape case from 1991, the discovery of mass graves, and the ongoing struggle of the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons, or APDP. The central thread connecting all of these examples is the source's claim that there's been a persistent, frustrating lack of accountability. So, beyond all the physical events and legal structures, the source argues there's this deep, lasting psychological impact. We're going to dive into what it calls the internal scars, the toll on a population where generations have grown up completely surrounded by conflict. And that internal cost is huge, according to the source. It describes widespread mental health challenges, children suffering from PTSD, nightmares, and anxiety. It points out how hard it is for students to just concentrate on school and highlights this staggering fact. Entire generations have never known a life outside of this conflict zone. It's a place where even wanting a normal life can be viewed with suspicion. So, all of this really leads to a final, pretty fundamental question that the source poses. In a situation like this, what does peace even mean? Is it just the absence of fighting, or is it something more? And the source has a very clear answer. It argues that real peace isn't just the absence of war. It's not just a quiet battlefield. No, it says peace is the presence of something. It's the presence of freedom, of dignity, and of justice for everyone. And this is where this source introduces a really powerful idea it calls managed silence. The argument is that the quiet you might see on the surface isn't peace at all. It's a silence that's enforced by fear, a place where just surviving often depends on not speaking out. And really, this final quote just sums the whole thing up so powerfully. It draws this sharp line between how peace might look from far away versus the reality for people living it. It suggests that just because you can't hear the protest anymore doesn't mean the suffering is stopped. And so after going through all this, the source really leaves us with one big question to think about, one that gets at the complicated trade-offs between state security and individual freedom. When a state tries to achieve security, what is the cost to the very people it's supposed to be securing?